Welcome to the Intentional Man Podcast, a podcast that inspires and equips men to lead lives of intentionality and grow to their full potential. I'm your host, Jonathan McGinley, a life coach that helps men just like you create the life that you want and live a story of significance through my coaching and tools on intentionality. Thanks for joining, and welcome to the show. All right, welcome to the show. It's great to be with you today. I'm very excited for this episode. I'm actually going to be slightly changing the format for the Intentional Man podcast. Each week now, you can expect a new episode every single Tuesday, releasing at 5 a.m. Mountain Standard Time. And 1 week, we'll have an in-depth interview with an inspirational guest, kind of how we've been doing. And then the next week will be a short recap of the interview where I can share some of my main takeaways from the interview and hopefully make things very practical and add a lot of value to you. And it's my sincere hope that each episode would inspire and equip you to build a life that you can be proud of, and one that is highly intentional about the things that matter to you. And so today's episode is going to be a recap of my interview with financial and wealth advisor Dustin West. If you have not had a chance to check out that episode yet, I would highly recommend going back and listening. It's a powerful episode where Dustin shares valuable insights on finances. I left my interview with Dustin incredibly inspired and honestly convicted in a lot of ways. Early on in the interview, he asked a simple but profound question. He said, "What is the one emotion that you had growing up in your home as it relates to finances?" And if you haven't had a chance to think through this yet, go ahead and pause the episode real quick and take a minute to think about it. I've never really heard this question asked before, but it is such a profound question and probably honestly is at the root of a lot of your financial decisions. And maybe you can't boil it down to one exact emotion, but you probably have some primary words that come to mind when you think of finances. For me, I was actually pretty split. On one hand, I had incredible parents that modeled a life of generosity, and I'm extremely grateful for that. And I saw money as a great way to bring joy to people when you sacrificially give, and I want to always keep that attitude. But on the other hand, when I really dug deep, I did have some fear involved when it came to money. And one of the words that came to mind for me was lack. I've had seasons in life where finances were tight. And so I had to learn to be frugal and to pinch pennies as much as possible. And while I believe those are great practices to have in place when money is tight, it's oftentimes led me to a place similar to Dustin's story where I felt like I had to hold on to it too tightly. And I've never really thought of the fact that holding money so tightly could have a lot of negative repercussions. It feels like the responsible thing to do, right? But what I found to be true is that it causes me to be very self-focused with my finances. And if my go-to emotion when I think about finances is fear, it's going to cause me to hold on to every bit that I can and to only think about how the money can benefit me. If opportunities come that I have to be generous, my first thought in that case and my natural instinct will be to just ignore the opportunity and keep the money to myself because I have to save everything. And he shared a story that I thought was so interesting. He said that when he was putting on these financial peace seminars through Dave Ramsey, he would do these over and over, and women would come up to him at the end of them, and a lot of them had tears in their eyes, and they were sad and frustrated that their husband was not giving more and not allowing them to live more. That was a common theme between a lot of different conversations that he had after these seminars, was that the women were frustrated that their family was not giving more, and they felt like their husband wasn't leading well in their finances, and that he was living completely out of a fearful mindset. And I honestly, I believe most of these husbands were probably trying their best to actually lead well into finances. I bet in most cases they were being extremely responsible, or at least they thought they were. But when fear is the number one emotion that drives you when it comes to money, uh, then your execution of finances is probably off. And he talked a lot about the difference between good intentions and the execution. Even if we think that we're doing right, if we have good intentions, that's a great thing. But sometimes even with the best intentions, our execution can be off. And so I've thought kind of long and hard about this one since the interview. And generosity is one of my core values. It's something I want my life to be about. But I realize that when I live with fear surrounding money, generosity doesn't come quite as easily. And if I change that mindset and see money as a gift and something that I can use to bless others and something that can always be made, then I can live more freely and be generous to those around me. So if you're living with a fear mindset, it might be time to evaluate exactly how that's affecting the way you view and treat your finances. One of the best ways to break this fear mindset is to start giving. And I think that feels pretty backwards, right? Like if we're fearful and we want to save and hoard money, it feels scary to then give. And usually, when we're in that spot, giving is one of the last things that we want to do. And I know my natural tendency in that situation is to hoard the money, but that's probably actually the very thing keeping me in bondage because it's keeping me completely focused on myself. Um, and I just there's a story that I was thinking about this week, reflecting on this conversation with Dustin. And in college, I had the amazing opportunity to travel to the country of Uganda, and our group spent some time in the slums of Kampala, which is the capital city of Uganda. And this is one of the poorest communities I've ever seen. The streets were lined with trash. All of the houses were just little shacks that were lined up right next to each other. And I saw a little girl fill up a water bottle out of water from the ditch that was next to the streets, and the water was completely brown. There was trash and there was waste around the ditches. I can still just vividly picture her pulling that bottle up and just seeing it just full of this nasty brown water. And she took a drink of it right in front of my eyes. Um, and it's because they didn't have a clean water source nearby. And so this was just one of the poorest places I've ever been. And we got connected to a church that was right in the middle of all of this. And all of the church members, everyone who went to that church actually lived in this community. So they knew the poverty, they had experienced it on a daily basis. And one Sunday at church, the pastor asked the entire congregation to donate money and resources and possessions and anything they had um, during the week that they should donate, and that the following Sunday they were going to invite everyone from the community to come and get anything that they needed. And so it was just going to be all donations from the church members to help anyone in the community who was in need. And when I looked around, I was looking at just everybody in that church building. Again, they're from this community, and I just thought to myself, like, what could these people possibly give? That they already live in one of the poorest communities in the whole country, and they barely have anything to their names. Um, but these people were different than me. They didn't let fear drive their decisions with money, even though they had very, very little. And the next Sunday, we came back to the church and found just this incredible supply of clothes and household items and money that these people had generously donated. And I watched it. We had invited people all week to come, and I watched as hundreds of people from the community came forward and they just took whatever their family needed, items that this church community had donated. And I just saw lives changed right in front of my eyes. People who were in desperate need were supplied with clothes and household items and money. They had taken a generous offering, and so they were giving money to people. And when I looked at the people who donated the items, I didn't see any fear in their eyes, any fear of them losing their possessions, any fear of them losing their money. What I saw was pure joy. I saw excitement. I saw the faces of people who understood that true joy and happiness comes when they gave up their finances and possessions to people in need. They had a mindset about money that it was a gift, that their life was going to be a river where it just flowed through to other people, that the blessings and the little things that they had would flow through to other people. And even though they lived in extreme poverty, they were extremely rich. And it's a scene that I'll never forget. And yeah, if you're holding on too tightly to your finances and not using it as a gift that you can use to bless others, it might be the time to start giving. Even if you don't have that much. I literally saw people who have considerably less than me, um, give just out of the joy of their hearts. I've seen firsthand just the joy that it brings people when they give, and just the freedom that it unlocks. And so I was just thinking about that a lot this week, of how this fear mindset of holding so tightly is actually robbing me of a lot of joy, and my tendency to save and to pinch pennies and to uh, keep things for myself can actually be a serious cause um, of me not having a lot of joy. And that the opportunity to give, and one of the methods to break down fear around money, is actually to give. And so I would just encourage you to start giving today, if that's not something that you're consistently doing. And one of the other big takeaways that I had from the episode was when Dustin talked about some of the fundamentals of personal finances. And one of those fundamentals was budgeting forward. And so, what he meant by this was at the start of the month, creating a budget where you're telling your money where to go the following month. A lot of people look back on the previous month and they budget from what they spent. But he talked about that subtle difference of, at the beginning of the month, budget. And tell your money where it should go based on your priorities in life. And if we don't, like, if we wait till the end of the month to give, you're probably going to find that there isn't much left, right? And if you wait until the end of the month to see if you have anything left to save and invest, you might not have much. So choose the things that are most important to you and budget those items first, and then work your way down from there. And if you don't have a budget, today is a great time to start. And I've heard a lot of people tell me that they don't like to budget because it takes away some of maybe their spontaneity, or that it can feel too restrictive at times. And I've definitely had those thoughts before. But when I've actually put together a very intentional budget, I find that it's exactly the opposite. A budget is actually extremely freeing, because I know if I have the money for a purchase or not. If money is tight for me, or you, and you don't have a budget, you'll probably be worrying in the back of your mind if you have enough money to make the purchase or to give it to somebody. But if you already have a budget, and you check the budget and you have the funds available, then you can make the purchase, or you can give freely without having any sort of worry. And that can be extremely freeing. And I think most of the problems I see with people who don't budget, uh, it doesn't necessarily come down to knowing the benefits that I just discussed, but a lot of times it has to do with taking the time and effort it takes to come up with a budget and to stick to it. Uh, Creating a budget can be hard work, and sticking to it is even harder work. And that might mean that you can't make a purchase that you want because it's not in the budget. Uh, in the moment, maybe you want to eat out at a restaurant, you're out with friends and you want to eat out, or maybe you want to buy some new shoes that you see, or whatever it may be. And so you make an emotional decision in the moment and make the purchase, even though you may not have the money for it. But with money and so many other things in life, you often have to make short term sacrifices that lead to great long term results. But our natural bend as humans is to make the easy short term decision, but that often leads to difficult long term results. It may be inconvenient now to budget. It may be inconvenient to track your expenses. It may be disappointing when your budget tells you that you have to say no to a purchase that you want to make. But those inconveniences will lead to a life with way more consequences in the future, and way less pain. And it might be less painful to skip out on making the budget and watch TV instead. In the moment, that probably feels good. When you're tired on a Sunday and you don't want to make a budget, you don't want to sit out and plan your finances, you'd way rather watch TV or be out with friends. That's the easy decision. But I guarantee you that the pain is going to be greater in the future when you're stressed out about your financial situation, because you didn't budget. And so, short term inconveniences like budgeting, like sticking to the budget, are typically the key to long term success. And there's a great book. It's called Take the Stairs. It's by Rory Vaden, that I've been reading recently. And he says in this, he says, surprisingly, success in life rarely comes from making big, grandiose decisions. Rather, success is the aggregate sum total of small, seemingly insignificant choices that, when compounded over time, create the trajectory of our lives. And isn't this the truth about personal finances? Like, it's usually not some grandiose event like winning the lottery that fixes your financial situation. It's usually being intentional with your finances on a daily basis, and making the disciplined decisions that lead to long-term success when they're compounded over time. And he also talks about in this book, the buffalo, an analogy about buffalo and cows. And Hunter and I actually discussed this on his episode. But when a storm is coming, cows, their natural tendency is to actually run away from the storm, which makes sense, right? The storm's coming, they start to run away from it. So they see it, turn the other way, start running. But then as the storm comes and it catches up to them, they keep running the opposite direction. And so then the storm actually catches them. And as they continue running, they actually are running with the storm. And so it increases the amount of time in which they're actually in the storm. So by cows thinking running away from the storm is the smart decision at the time, the easier decision, it actually increases the pain that they experience in the future. And on the other hand, buffalo do the opposite. So when they see a storm coming, they actually charge into the storm. And as the storm passes over them, they keep running right into it. And so it actually decreases the time where they're actually in the middle of the storm. So by making the tough decision to run toward the storm, it actually minimizes the long-term effects, and they're in the storm for a shorter amount of time. So I was just thinking about that in terms of finances. Like, what are those disciplines? What are the habits? What are the things you have to say no to that at the time is an inconvenience, but ultimately is going to set you up for success in the future? Because when you stay disciplined and you stick to the budget and you make sacrifices in the short term with finance, it's going to set you up to have way less pain with finances, way less stress, and actually set you up for success in the future. And then the last takeaway that I had that I'm immediately trying to implement is getting some accountability with my finances. I thought that was such a great point that he made. And if you didn't catch this, he said that he has actually pretty much like a financial committee that he's put together around his finances. So any decision that he's making, not every decision, but he has people who know his finances and can speak into them when needed. And obviously, if you're married, guys, include your wives in this. They are part of that committee. He said his wife was the CEO, so they are a huge part of this. But this was a big thing for me because I'm really the only one who knows my financial situation, and I think that can be a very dangerous spot to be in. I've been managing my finances alone, and so no one knows how I'm spending my money. And while that might be easier than allowing someone to speak into it, I think sometimes finances can be kind of a touchy subject and something that we're really personal about, and so we're unwilling to share it with people. But so it might be easier not to share it with people, but ultimately, I know I'll manage my money so much better if I have some accountability. And so I've already reached out to some people this week to try to help me in this area, some people who can really keep me on track, make sure I'm spending my money on the things that I say are most important to me, to make sure that I'm giving, to make sure that I'm saving, to make sure that I'm investing, to make sure I'm sticking with my budget. All those things I know, even though they may seem a little more difficult now, are going to set me up for a better financial future. So I would highly recommend, whether it's friends, family, financial advisor, somebody just that you trust and would allow into your finances, to bring them in and have some accountability there to make sure that you're headed in the right direction. So that's all I have for you today. I hope you enjoyed the show. I'd love to hear any of your thoughts or feedback on what you took away from the interview with Dustin or from this episode. So please follow me on social media and reach out with any of your thoughts, because I'd love to start a conversation with you and discuss them. And we'll see you next time. Thank you for tuning in to the Intentional Man podcast. If you enjoyed this episode and you would like to support the show, please share it with others, post about it on social media, and leave a rating and review. If you are someone who is looking to take your life to the next level, accelerate your success, and live more intentionally, I would love to help. Shoot me a text at 970-430-6085, and we can schedule a time to meet to discuss your vision and your goals. Again, that is 970-430-6085. Thanks again for listening, and until next time, build a life that matters by living intentionally.